The value of a college education is going down. And yet, tuition is skyrocketing. Where's all the money going? Hey there, Jared Julia here, and welcome to another episode of The Cave. Thanks so much for joining me. As you know, as a parent, or if you're going to college, you know that college has skyrocketed. The price of a college education has nothing to do with the rate of inflation. Everything else has kind of gone up with the rate of inflation, with the exception of certain technological things that have actually gone down. You're spending less on a computer than you did many years ago. We're paying less for our mobile phones than our parents did for long distance service through Ma Bell or whatever. But everything else has kind of gone up gradually with the rate of inflation, except for two things. One is healthcare, and the other is a college education. So yes, your parents spent a lot less money on cars and on real estate, but also spent less money on your college education. But oh my gosh, even adjusted for inflation, you're spending a ton more for college education. But wait, folks, it gets worse because when you were going to college, like I went to college in the 1980s. People of my generation and older, we were more likely to be taught by a professor, a full professor, than our kids were. Our kids are far more likely to be taught by a lecturer. Now, what's the difference? Well, a full professor is paid more, and they obviously have job security. They can achieve tenure, but even before they achieve tenure, they have certain job security. Lecturers have no job security. They're hired for a semester, or they're hired for a year, and then they can be let go at any time for really any reason. And they're paid a lot less. So they're actually spending less today on educating our children than they were spending to educate us. So, once again, it makes it even worse. It's like, once again, where is all the money going? Well, it's interesting that we've got a couple of answers for you. And you're not going to like any of them, unfortunately. But here they are. The first one is amenities. There's this huge rush to build more buildings, and they're not just updating lecture halls or building newer dorms. There's this whole push for luxury, and I'm going to take a quote from Dr. Benjamin Merkel, the president of New St. Andrews College in Moscow, Idaho. Here is what he's saying about what he calls the amenities arms race in college campuses right now.
Another significant contributor to skyrocketing tuition is the amenities arms race, the nonstop contest to build, and the expectation that our college campuses provide a resort-like amenities package. Now, on the one hand, you need buildings to house your college. I have no objection to the president who is raising money to build classrooms for his students. That is, in fact, what I spend much of my own time doing. But colleges are less interested in building simple lecture halls and are now consumed with climbing walls, lazy rivers, hot tubs, and various spa facilities.
So isn't that interesting? So that also accounts for a lot of the money that you're spending on tuition. But there's other wasteful practices as well. This one may not cost as much up front, but it's going to start to cost a lot of these colleges more and more because of the legal fees associated with them. And that is what's known as bias response teams. And I don't know if you've ever heard of this term, but I actually did another video on it. I actually took a scene from my graphic novel where I poke fun at bias response teams. And that video is also on this channel, so look for that. It's called What is a Bias Response Team? And it really just shows a scene from my graphic novel. It's like a 1-minute cartoon only. But anyways, what a bias response team is it's a group of administrators and campus police that basically go after what Orwell used to refer to as wrongthink. Anyone that has a wrong opinion can be reported by a classmate or by a faculty member, and they can report a classmate or faculty member can be the target of this. So it's really kind of tattling on each other, which is what the Hitler Youth were encouraged to do in Nazi Germany, and what the Red Guards were encouraged to do during the Cultural Revolution in China. It's just like, hey, tattle on your classmates, and we'll bring them up into some kind of a struggle session. And a struggle session was something where they would question, why do you believe this? Why did you say this? And they can be quite aggressive in nature. So basically, that's what's happening on college campuses today, where somebody can go online or tap on an app, and they can report someone to the bias response team, and then the bias response team will have a call or a meeting with the accused. And talking about that is a Dr. Liliana Garces. I'm probably mispronouncing that name, but she's an associate professor of leadership and policy at the University of Texas at Austin. And here's what she has to say about some of the legal cases against bias response teams.
As of the beginning of this year, the organization Speech First had filed lawsuits challenging the constitutionality of bias response teams at 6 different colleges and universities. The organization alleges, as you mentioned, that the processes that these teams use, particularly those that report incidents to investigative bodies, or those that invite students who are allegedly responsible for the incidents to participate in discussions about bias, that these actions violate the First Amendment on the grounds that they deter speech or lead to self-censorship. And in response, colleges and universities have argued that what these teams, that they don't chill the speech because participation in the meetings is voluntary, or that the teams lack the authority to impose any kind of punitive action. What I find interesting in following some of these cases is that there hasn't been we haven't had a ruling to really address whether the teams themselves are unconstitutional. The ways that the questions have come up is as decisions look to see whether the organization itself has standing to bring the lawsuit. Meaning, are there grounds to bring the lawsuit? Because the organization has to show that there's a member of its organization that's been objectively self-censored or faced a credible threat of enforcement, like suspension on the basis of speech. And at the trial court, I believe all the rulings have sided with the universities, denying Speech First requests to stop the teams from operating. And they've done so on the grounds that there was no specific evidence to show that any student was actually disciplined, sanctioned, or investigated for their speech. And so it led the courts to conclude that the members didn't objectively self-censor or face a credible threat of enforcement. Now, that's a different story on appeal. All these cases have been appealed, and now there's a split, meaning there's some circuit courts have ruled in the same way, and some others have reversed. For example, in the 6th and the 5th Circuit, and I believe most recently now in the 11th Circuit, concluded that just the mere threat of a disciplinary referral by a university official and the invitation to meet with students objectively chills a student's speech. And the rationale for these decisions have really been based on hypothetical scenarios. The kind of reasonable average person and what they might feel. On the other hand, we have the 7th Circuit that held that the mere possibility of a referral or the invitation to meet was not sufficient to objectively deter speech. And so in all cases, the Court of Appeals have sent the cases back to the trial courts, but at the end of the day, the universities have decided to settle and either dismantle or change the ways that the teams operate.
So to translate what she just said, they're having to defend this in court because courts are, because there's organizations that are accusing these colleges of that these bias response teams are literally violating students and faculty's constitutional right to freedom of speech. So the initial reaction, obviously, is for them to lawyer up to defend themselves against these accusations in court. And now, in response, instead of seeing them through legally, they're settling out of court, and also they're just shutting down a lot of these biased response teams. So that's kind of the good news, because these are terrible organizations anyways, that really vilify people for simply having wrongthink. It's a terrible idea, but it's also a terrible lesson to teach these kids that if they ever have wrongthink, if they're ever even accused of saying anything out of line with the people in power, that they can be involved in one of these, Soviet-style struggle sessions, and it's just a terrible thing to teach kids, and it's a terrible and unfair thing to do to kids that simply have an opinion that is not absolutely in line with woke ideology, or not absolutely in line with the people that run colleges and universities. So that's kind of good news, is that they're kind of backing down now that they're being brought into court. But it is at the same time kind of sad that they have to be brought into court. Everyone has to lawyer up and spend all kinds of money on this nonsense before these people will simply have enough common sense to not have a bias response team in place. But anyways, so like I said, I guess there is a positive here that we're going in the right direction. No, none of these colleges are creating new bias response teams, but a lot of the existing bias response teams are being shut down. So there's less now than there were, say, a year ago. So I suppose that is good news. We are making progress. Anytime anyone tells you that you being active, or you showing up at your kids' school meeting or parent-teacher conference, or not to show up at school board meetings, that's just wrong. You are making a difference. The tide is turning. So you still should continue to be active if you're an active parent in this whole mess, or if you haven't done anything yet because you don't think that it'll matter. Hey, it matters. Get involved in one of these parents' rights organizations and say your piece, and just get involved and help other parents to solve this terrible problem in our education system. So, anyways, so you can make a difference. You have more power than you realize, especially when you're part of a group that's organized and focused. So anyways, thanks so much for joining me on another edition of The Cave. I love the fact that you guys, that there's so many people watching these videos and paying attention to this issue. I think it's great. So thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time on another episode of The Cave. Well, if you like what you saw, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. And don't forget to smack that bell.